Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan arrived in 1982 as a film about revenge and became somewhere behind a glass partition in a radiation chamber, something considerably harder to shake. These are the real lives of the people who gave it that weight. The man who made James T. Kirk one of television's defining archetypes was living out of a truck camper in the San Fernando Valley when Star Trek was canceled in 1969, performing dinner theater to support 3 daughters while the industry moved on without him. Shatner was 50 when Wrath of Khan began filming, and what director Nicholas Meyer drew from him was something the television years had rarely required: genuine vulnerability, the kind belonging to a man finally forced to confront his own mortality. Kirk's estranged son, his accumulating regrets, and his first true no-win scenario gave Shatner material his most devoted admirers still cite as his finest work in the role. He had married 4 times, to Gloria Rand, with whom he had 3 daughters, to actress Marcy Lafferty for over 2 decades, and to Nerine Kidd in 1997. 2 years into that marriage, he returned home to find Nerine dead in their swimming pool, an accidental drowning linked to her alcoholism, a loss he has discussed with unusual candor across the years since. He married Elizabeth Martin in 2001 and divorced in 2020. He suffers from severe tinnitus caused by a pyrotechnic explosion on the original series set. In 2021, at 90, he became the oldest person to fly to space aboard a Blue Origin capsule, a real-life echo no screenwriter would have dared invent. Now 95, he continues appearing at conventions and giving interviews. Nimoy had asked for Spock to be killed. He had grown weary of the character after 15 years and told producer Harve Bennett he was only returning if the death was genuinely meaningful. Bennett agreed, and the result was one of the most significant deaths in science fiction cinema. Nimoy was 50 during filming, and the specific staging of the glass partition farewell with Shatner was entirely his own invention, as was the Vulcan nerve pinch on McCoy before entering the radiation chamber. He privately battled alcoholism through the original series years and into the films, a struggle he resolved through rehab and a sobriety that held for the remainder of his life. He had been married to Sandra Zober for 33 years before divorcing, then to Susan Bay from 1989 until his death, with 2 children, Julie and Adam. After directing Star Trek 3 and 4, he helmed 3 Men and a Baby in 1987, a massive commercial success outside the franchise entirely. Away from performance, he published poetry collections and photography books that found serious audiences. He died on February 27, 2015, at 83, from COPD caused by decades of heavy smoking he had abandoned 30 years before the disease finally reached him, spending his final months posting a single repeated message to his followers: "Do not smoke." During the filming of Across the Wide Missouri in 1951, Ricardo Montalbán was thrown from a horse and trampled. The spinal injury that resulted caused constant pain for the rest of his life, and by 1993 he had lost all feeling below the waist, performing his final roles from a wheelchair. He was 60 when he reprised Khan Noonien Singh in Wrath of Khan, a character first played in a 1967 television episode, and brought to the screen's most celebrated Star Trek villain something genuinely unsettling: total, unperformed conviction. The question of his physique followed the film for decades, with audiences widely assuming the chest visible beneath his open shirt was prosthetic enhancement. Both Montalban and director Nicholas Meyer maintained throughout their lives that it was real, the result of a lifetime of rigorous exercise practiced through decades of chronic pain. He was married to Georgiana Young, sister of actress Loretta Young, from 1944 until her death in 2007, 63 years and 4 children, a devotion he carried without boast. A devout Catholic who avoided Hollywood's social circuit entirely, he founded the Nosotros Foundation to advocate for Latino representation in entertainment, building something lasting alongside the career. He died on January 14, 2009, at 88. In every scene of this film, he was performing opposite a script supervisor rather than William Shatner, a budget and scheduling constraint that makes everything he projected considerably more remarkable. When the Wrath of Khan script arrived, DeForest Kelley refused a line. The dying Spock sequence had given McCoy the character's most famous catchphrase, and Kelley argued firmly that delivering "He's dead, Jim" at that particular moment would pull an unintentional laugh from any audience and destroy the scene's solemnity. He won the argument, and the line went to Scotty instead. Kelley was 61 during filming, carrying a private biographical detail that gave his entire run as a television physician a quiet, persistent irony. He had wanted to study medicine in real life, but his family could not afford the tuition. He was deeply moved throughout his career by fans who told him McCoy had steered them toward medicine. He had met his wife Carolyn Dowling while making a Navy training film during the Second World War, and they married in 1945, remaining together for 54 years until his death. They had no children. He gardened, kept a pet turtle named Myrtle, and avoided Hollywood social life with a consistency that became its own understated reputation. Across both the original series and the subsequent films, he served as the unofficial peacemaker between Shatner and the rest of the cast, a role nobody formally assigned him and he never claimed for himself. He died of stomach cancer on June 11, 1999, the first of the main cast to go. When early in the original Star Trek series, Nichelle Nichols decided to leave. The role felt limiting, Broadway was calling, and she had made up her mind. A private conversation with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. changed it. He told her she could not step away from the first role in American television history to present a black woman as an intelligent professional equal, that her presence on that bridge carried a significance no Broadway production could match. She stayed. Nichols was 48 during Wrath of Khan, and Uhura had been part of her life for over 15 years by then. She had been married briefly to Foster Johnson, with whom she had one son, Kyle, and to Duke Mondi from 1968 to 1972, and she also acknowledged a romantic relationship with series creator Gene Roddenberry in the years before the show began. After the films, she spent decades as a NASA volunteer recruiter, specifically targeting women and minority candidates, bringing astronauts including Mae Jemison and Sally Ride into the space program with a determination that reshaped it. She died of heart failure on July 30, 2022, at 89. Her estate subsequently filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the hospital managing her dementia care, and in June 2026, a jury awarded $13 million based on a finding of medical negligence. A portion of her ashes was launched into deep space. 6 bullets struck James Doohan during the D-Day invasion of Normandy, the result of friendly fire as he returned to his post, and one of them destroyed his right middle finger entirely. He concealed that injury across the entire run of Star Trek, holding objects strategically or keeping the hand out of frame, and almost nobody noticed across 5 television seasons and 6 films. Doohan was 61 during Wrath of Khan, and the scene where Scotty carries his mortally wounded nephew to the bridge gave him the most dramatically exposed moment of his franchise career. He had married 3 times, to Janet Young for 15 years, briefly to Anita Yeagle, and from 1974 until his death to Wende Braunberger, with 3 children between them, including a daughter born when he was 80. He had 7 children in total and had been labeled the craziest pilot in the Canadian Air Force after flying a plane between telegraph poles on a dare, an impulsive bravado that never entirely left him. The typecasting that followed Star Trek largely confined him to convention work, where he was by every account genuinely warm and consistently moved by the engineers and technicians who told him Scotty had pointed them toward their careers. He died on July 20, 2005, at 85, from a combination of Parkinson's disease, diabetes, pulmonary fibrosis, and Alzheimer's. Paul Winfield had been nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actor in 1973 for Sounder, placing him among the most seriously regarded dramatic performers of his generation, and Captain Clark Terrell in Wrath of Khan was in some respects a commercial detour from the weighty work that had defined him. He was 42 during filming, and his character's central scene, where Terrell resists Khan's mind control long enough to vaporize himself rather than kill Kirk, gave him one of the film's quietest acts of moral courage. He returned to the Star Trek universe years later as Captain Daython in the Next Generation episode Darmok, widely considered one of the finest hours in the franchise's entire television history. For 30 years, he shared his life with his partner Charles Gillen Jr., a relationship he kept entirely private at a time when disclosure would have carried professional consequences he chose not to risk. Gillen died of bone cancer in 2002, a loss that devastated Winfield and visibly affected his health in the 2 remaining years of his life. He won an Emmy for Picket Fences in 1995, played Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in a celebrated 1978 television film, and narrated A&E's City Confidential with a voice that made even ordinary facts sound consequential. He bred and showed pug dogs at competitive events with an enthusiasm that startled everyone who knew him only from his roles. He died of a heart attack on March 7, 2004, at 62. Director Nicholas Meyer fought specifically for Bibi Besch. The studio wanted someone younger and more conventionally glamorous for Dr. Carol Marcus, but Meyer insisted on a woman who looked age-appropriate to Shatner, naturally intelligent, and professionally credible without effort. Besch was 41 during filming, the daughter of celebrated Austrian stage and film actress Gusti Huber, and she brought to Carol Marcus a self-possessed authority that made Kirk's regret about her entirely believable. She had done years of soap opera work on Somerset and The Edge of Night before the film, then built one of the 1980s most productive supporting careers afterward, earning an Emmy nomination for Northern Exposure in 1992 and appearing in Steel Magnolias and Tremors. She was deeply invested in Screen Actors Guild politics, serving as an active board member with a reputation for taking the union's welfare seriously when many of her peers treated it as a formality. She married Donald Mathis and later divorced, and her daughter from that marriage is actress Samantha Mathis, who became known to a later generation through Broken Arrow and Little Women. Besch was diagnosed with breast cancer and managed the disease across multiple rounds of treatment while continuing to work, a private discipline she maintained without public announcement. The cancer suddenly worsened in 1996. She died on September 7, 1996, at 54. George Takei was 4 years old when the United States government forcibly relocated his family to Japanese-American internment camps following Executive Order 9066, an experience that shaped every dimension of his subsequent public life. He was 44 during Wrath of Khan and had spent the preceding years quietly unhappy about the script, having been told Sulu was originally to receive a promotion to captain of the USS Excelsior that was cut from the final film. He made his frustration known. What he did not make known, not for another 20 years, was that he had been in a relationship with Brad Altman since 1985, a partnership they concealed out of genuine fear that disclosure would end his acting career. He came out publicly in 2005 at 68, prompted by California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger's veto of a same-sex marriage bill. He and Brad married in a high-profile ceremony in September 2008, and Brad subsequently became his business and public relations manager. As a child, he had been imprisoned. As an adult, he planned the Los Angeles subway system, serving on the board of the Southern California Rapid Transit District, and he starred in the Broadway musical Allegiance in 2015, drawing directly on the internment camp years. He originally met Brad at the LA Frontrunners, an LGBTQ running club, which makes him a competitive marathon runner as well as one of social media's most effective political voices. Now 89, he attends public appearances with Brad's physical assistants, still present, still watchful. That Wrath of Khan cheerfully ignores is one fans have been pointing out for over 4 decades. Chekhov was not added to the Star Trek television cast until Season 2, well after the Season 1 episode in which Khan first appeared, meaning there is no logical way Chekhov could recognize him. Koenig and director Nicholas Meyer acknowledged this and decided the dramatic weight of the recognition scene mattered more than resolving a timeline technicality. Koenig was 45 during filming, married to actress Judy Leavitt since 1965, and they remained together for 57 years across conventions, fan events, and the full arc of everything Star Trek became, until her death in December 2022. He had 2 children, Danielle and Andrew. In 2010, his son Andrew, known to audiences from Growing Pains, went missing in Vancouver and was subsequently found to have died by suicide following a severe depressive episode. Koenig has spoken about that loss with a sustained openness, channeling it into mental health advocacy and suicide prevention work that has defined much of his public presence in the years since. He taught psychology and performance at UCLA at various intervals in his career, wrote the first original script for the Star Trek animated series, and played the telepathic villain Alfred Bester in Babylon 5 with a cold precision entirely unlike Chekhov. He provided a voiceover cameo as President Anton Chekhov in Star Trek Picard. Now 89 and still attending conventions, he does not appear to be finished. He had been playing Johnny the Slashman Slash in the cult teen sitcom Square Pegs alongside a young Sarah Jessica Parker when Star Trek II cast him as David Marcus, Kirk's estranged scientist son, and the double life of those 2 parallel profiles, the new wave high schooler and the Enterprise's newly discovered heir, captured something genuinely strange about the early 1980s. Butrick was 21 during filming, and William Shatner praised his raw, instinctive energy in interviews at the time, noting the father-son dynamic landed immediately despite no physical resemblance between them. He reprised David Marcus in Star Trek III, where the character is killed by Klingons, and returned to the franchise one final time as a different character in a Next Generation episode in 1988. His personal life during those years was managed with a privacy that the decade made necessary rather than merely preferred. He contracted HIV at a time when an AIDS diagnosis was not survivable and carried the knowledge privately, telling almost nobody, continuing to work in Los Angeles theater and earned serious critical notices for stage performances that reached small audiences while his health declined. He died alone in his Hollywood apartment on March 17, 1989, at 29, from toxoplasmosis and pneumonia, both complications of advanced AIDS. 2 panels of the National AIDS Memorial Quilt are dedicated specifically to him. His father hosted a children's television program in Houston under the stage name Cadet Don, which means Ike Eisenmann was raised inside the specific atmosphere of performance directed at young audiences long before he became one of Disney's most recognizable child stars himself. He played Tony Malone in Escape to Witch Mountain in 1975, and its sequel Return from Witch Mountain in 1978, and the transition from beloved Disney child actor to Peter Preston, Scotty's young nephew whose death from radiation burns provides Wrath of Khan its first genuine glimpse of war's cost, placed him in considerably darker territory at 19. The crucial scene establishing Preston as Scotty's nephew was cut from the theatrical release for pacing reasons, leaving the emotional weight of Doohan's breakdown without its full context until the television cut and later director's editions restored it. After the film, Eisenmann stepped away from on-camera acting and built a second career behind the board as a loop group coordinator, voiceover artist, and Foley specialist, providing the grunts, breaths, and combat sounds for Joaquin Phoenix's villain in Ridley Scott's Gladiator in 2000, a contribution invisible in the credits and fundamental to the film's physical texture. He recently published a memoir titled You'll Never Be a Star, tracing his path from Disney icon to the invisible craft workers who give screen performance its physical reality. Now 63, his career exists almost entirely in sound no audience has ever thought to attribute to a name. Right around the time Wrath of Khan entered production in 1981, Kirstie Alley's mother was killed and her father severely injured by a drunk driver. She was 30, arriving on the set of her first feature film, carrying that grief into the work of portraying a Vulcan cadet suppressing every emotion the culture demanded she deny. The performance was precise enough that she admitted to sleeping in the Vulcan ears and occasionally smuggling the uniform home overnight. She did not return for Star Trek III because her agent's salary demands exceeded the production budget and the role was recast. Cheers arrived in 1987, replacing Shelley Long as Rebecca Howe and winning both an Emmy and a Golden Globe for it. Her marriage to Parker Stevenson ran from 1983 to 1997 and ended in a contentious, expensive divorce. Following a miscarriage during the marriage, they had adopted 2 children, William True and Lily Price. She described John Travolta in later interviews as the greatest love of her life, a feeling she said she had resisted acting on because she was already married. She had overcome a serious cocaine addiction before her career began through Narconon and became one of Scientology's most publicly committed celebrity members. In her final years, her anti-vaccine positions and political alignments cost her industry relationships she had held for decades. She died on December 5, 2022, at 71, from stage 4 colon cancer diagnosed only weeks before. She owned a private rescue zoo in Florida that housed over a dozen lemurs, which is the kind of detail that resists every effort to reduce her to a single story. He was born in Leeds, arrived in America in the mid-1960s, and spent the back half of his career as one of the quietly essential figures the franchise industry depends on without ever quite seeing. John Winston reprised Commander Kyle in Wrath of Khan at 53, having played the same transporter chief across the original television run, and director Nicholas Meyer's decision to bring a minor recurring character back delighted him completely. He later said the quality of the uniform alone, compared to the simple velour tunics of the television years, signaled that something different was being attempted this time. Away from the franchise, he was a gifted musical theater performer who played lead roles in regional productions of Camelot, My Fair Lady, and Oliver throughout the 1970s and 1980s, a range entirely unknown to the Star Trek audience, who knew him only through a handful of scenes across multiple productions. He volunteered for the Los Angeles Bureau of Music, directing theater programs for hospitals, with a consistency suggesting he found the work as meaningful as anything the industry offered him commercially. His personal life was kept with a completeness that means almost nothing is documented of it, a privacy he maintained across decades without apparent difficulty. He made his final appearance in the fan-produced internet project Star Trek: New Voyages in 2004. He died on September 19, 2019, at 91, and the SAG-AFTRA union published his name in their newsletter the following spring. The quiet last note for a man who had always preferred to let the work speak without asking for additional attention.